with this internal audit function, I think everybody would, reading those accounts, assume it was all on that specific, if it's inspection fee or verification fee or consultancy. Yeah, because I would have absolutely assumed it was on the internal financial audit. So I'm pleased to hear that because the figure was so high. Just one or two other small points I want to ask. On page 52 of your accounts, just explain the last line. Outstanding VAT repayable to be offset against future integrated ticketing scheme capital expenditure, €494,379. Why is there an outstanding VAT repayable amount there? Explain, just take that. What does it mean?
It's rather complex, but in relation to the integrated ticketing scheme, the RPA was carrying out some development work for the NTA. So on those invoices, they charged VAT as it was a vatable activity. The NTA then was entitled to recover that VAT, so we had it as a repayable position. But in actual fact, rather than keeping it as cash for the NTA, we offset that VAT repayable against the grants that the department ultimately pay back to the NTA. So it's a VAT repayable amount due to the NTA, and we recognise that actually that's not our asset. It's to be offset against future grants from the Department of Transport.
Okay. On page 49, one figure about your pension scheme. And the one figure, again, in this day and age, people will be absolutely intrigued at is that you give the details of the description of your defined benefit scheme on page 49, and your entire pension scheme is based on expected future pensionable salary increases of 3.5% per annum. Now, I certainly hope people didn't get a 3.5% increase last year, and I hope they don't get one this year, because I don't think we can afford that at the moment when there are cuts across the place. And why is your pension scheme based on the assumption that you are paid a 3.5% salary increase this year, last year, and next year? That assumption can't be correct, because are you doing that?
Well, we're just taking the salary increases. Just our organisation is structured on public sector grades, so we have a mixture of two types of grades. They're either the local authority grades, because the bulk of the transportation officer on that, or civil service grades for some of the people who've moved into our organisation. So it's structured public sector pay grades. That's our payment, our salary base. But on the issue of the FRS 17 accounting. This
note is generally required to be consistent with what's called Financial Reporting Standard 17, which is generally accepted accounting principles. So we're following that accounting discipline. In terms of the 3.5%, this is actually an actuarial type calculation to forecast what the pension charge should be noted as in the accounts and what the ultimate liabilities might be in the long term. So in summary, what the actuaries do is they build some assumptions into their long-term forecasting model around what the pension charges ultimately will be for the NTA and what is appropriate to recognise in the current year. So they're more modelling assumptions for kind of longer-term pension liabilities, as opposed to indicate what we expect salary increases to actually be.
It must be based on what they assume is going to happen.
Yes, I mean, they need to factor in some assumptions, because pensions of their very nature are long-term, and the actuaries building these assumptions and their industry kind of acceptable.
Well, then you were saying to me, if there's no increase last year, this year in the public service, they're budgeting a 7% increase in some other year. If there's zero this year and it's an average of 3.5, you're assuming to be 7% salary increase. I don't think it's valid.
3.5 would be an average over the long term.
Given that there's zero increase last year, the year before, this year, you're obviously, that 3.5% is an average figure. And if there's zero several years in a row, you must be assuming 7% some other years to make up the average of 3.5. Socially accessible. I don't know, does someone else want to comment? Chair, through the chair, just I think somebody behind it. Yeah.
Yes, Deputy. My understanding is that the actuaries would look back over a long period as well. So they'd be looking back over what has the increase been over, let's say, 20 years, and then they're projecting forward. It is something that is a bit of a concern for me, and you'll see these assumptions are relatively standard. There is some variation, and there's no particularly obvious reason to me why there would be variation. I think there should be standard assumptions used, and the assumptions should be based in a reasonable expectation of what's likely to occur in the future. And certainly in the current climate, the idea that in the long term there'll be a 3.5% increase in pensionable salary. I mean, you're talking about a 1.5% real increase against a 2% inflation there over 20, 30, 40, 50 years is the projection. It's something that I drew attention to in relation to the social insurance fund projections. And it's probably something we'll talk about on another occasion. But there is, I think, an issue there that there may be an element of overstatement of liabilities. But I think we're satisfied that the authority has followed FRS 17 correctly.
Was the assumptions, the
But
underlying
there is
assumptions
something,
are the issue?
there is an issue to be addressed in relation to this.
On page 50 of your accounts, the integrated ticketing system, you have a detailed note on it. We spoke about the cost of it earlier. Chairman has asked you to send a note. But it's intriguing that the cost of the integrated ticketing system that you have in your accounts on the 1st of January 2011, if you look on page 50, it's a separate item listed there, and you depreciated each year. It came in at 40,592,000 was the opening value of the expenditure, and you did mention a figure of 55 million earlier. So what I will ask you to do when you're providing the information, I want you to tie the figures in this 55 million figure that has been mentioned here on the integrated ticketing system to the figures in the financial accounts when they come back to us. You'll do that. And two last quick things.
Interject there, Deputy. Sorry, I've just been advised, a message passed to me by Tim Gaston, who was the project director of LEAP from its inception in 2001, that the 55.4 million includes all expenditure.
Back to the 2001.
Yeah, since the beginning of the project in 2002.
Okay, right.
Sorry, I didn't know that earlier.
Finally, in relation to, because you do have a role in relation to seeing are all these companies providing a proper service, and your appendix to your accounts has figures in relation to the DART, Dublin Bus, Airn. The intriguing one I find is the Lewis service on page 59. And you said Lewis measures punctuality, because you have standards there in terms of punctuality and delivery of service. So on page 59, Lewis measures punctuality in terms of the total number of minutes lost due to delays. There is no contractual target for punctuality. However, the operator pays a financial penalty for every minute of delay. And you're saying the red line, the average delay per quarter was recorded over the quarter was 545 minutes, which I estimated about 6 minutes a day. And the green line was a smaller figure. So explain how that worked and how much financial penalty did they pay?
Well, I think what it is that they say there's no contractual target for punctuality, but they pay a penalty for every minute delayed. I suppose it ends up.
Which did they pay?
I don't have that figure.
Would it be significant?
It's relatively significant, all right, but we could certainly get that figure for you very easy. We just don't have it to hand today.
What I'll ask you to do is flesh out that for us. It seems to be 6 minutes. How is it calculated? And then you just go over the page to more about Lewis, and it's about there's a fine or a penalty if a service doesn't run, and if they miss a service and they know they're going to incur a fine, is there an incentive in them just to run one at an odd hour just to say we ran a service? You know, explain how that works to us.
Yes, we'll do.
And the last thing then, something that wasn't touched on at all, on the final part of your appendix, you have a role in relation to regional planning guidelines and local planning and the land use and transport. I think anybody who's ever been involved in local authority knows the issue of public transport is an issue. I see during the year under review you've made submissions to about 30 development plans, regional plans and county development plans and town development plans. Have you a big planning section, or who does there seems to be a lot of work for somebody to make 30 submissions? The volume of draft development plans are enormous documents. Have you a standard one, you just change the cover and the front and send it off to each local authority, or does much work go into that? Because it's a very important issue for the public in terms of future. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I'll pass it on to you just to finalise the reply. But there's two areas in which we work with local authorities. We work actually with all the local authorities in the Dublin area prior to them doing these development plans, actually working through the issues with them. And then we work with the regional authorities on a lot of their submissions and the preparation of their guidelines. So there's a lot of preparatory work and liaison work done with them. Yes, we have a significant planning quotient of staff and reflects what is our national obligations. So perhaps you would pick up on that.
We have a small unit of experienced planners who do a number of functions, but we do invest a lot of effort in working with local authorities, try and integrate transport into land use planning at the early stage. If we don't get that integration right from day one, insofar as we can, we're playing catch up every year afterwards. So there's a small unit involved in it. We work actively with the various local authorities and the regional authorities, and no, we don't copy the submission each time. They're individual.
And you deal with roads as well? Or is it just rail and public service? What do you deal with the local authority? Is it just public transport?
We
You deal with roads as well, do you?
focus on the full transport quotient, and because you need to look at the full picture in order to see what the needs are in roads or public transport. But our remit then in roads, as you will know, it's limited. Nevertheless, we have a close liaison with the NRA and the national roads wherever there's an interface there.
And issues like park and ride, they're obviously a big issue, but it's fabulous when they do park and ride facilities at all the train stations for people to commute, but then if CIE comes along and trebles the parking rate for the week, or goes from €1 a day to €3 or €4 a day, it utterly defeats the whole purpose. Have you a role in agreeing the CIE fees to be charged in their park and ride and in their car parks that people use to get on their trains? Because you have a role in relation to the fare. I would see how much you have to pay at the station, part of effectively your fare of getting to wherever you're going. Have you a role in setting the fare in the car parks?
No, we don't actually have formalised a role in that, but we actually we're aware of all the changes and the plans that they bring in. So the car parks are through their CIE property section. We're not contracted with CIE property as such, but we're aware of the balance between car parking cost and encouraging people on the public transport. So we haven't within our contract a power, but actually we work with them on the plans.
And the last question then is, given that you have obviously some planners in your organisation to deal, have you many accountants in your organisation, not to deal with your accounting function, but to deal with the financials of the type of an issue we're just talking about, such that when CIE puts in for a fare increase, who have you financially, or do you have to hire a consultant, or do you just take blindly the figures they give you? Like, have you many financial accountants to assess financially a request for a fare increase?
We have a number of accountants in our organisation. We had an economist whom we lost to another public body, and we've just got an approval to recruit an economist, which we would use also for analysis of fares and trends in the public transport area.
Thanks, Deputy Fleming. I just want to clarify, Mr. Murphy, a number of things. To go back to what Deputy Ross was speaking about. At the end of last year, Irish Rail, or it was stated or reported that Irish Rail was close to securing a deal with the private sector buyer to sell land holdings at the Spencer Dock in Dublin. And that as part of the problems for that company at that time, they required €16 million. And the report went on to state to allow it to pay for its day-to-day expenses such as till rolls and toilet rolls. Did your organisation step in that €16 million?
Well, on the Spencer Dock one, I understand they realised 20 million from the sale of a property, which went to defray the major deficit and partly helped the cash flow. The government made in 2012 made 36 million extra money available for subsidy, which we dispersed to.
16 million, just for 1 minute. That you didn't have to intervene there.
It was more than 16. There was 36 million made available in an extra subvention last year. There was a 16 and a 20. There was a first block payment of 16, and then there was a second 20.
My question.
Yes, you're correct.
That is your role.
That's right. What happened was the government made an additional subsidy available of 36 million.
Three conditions of payment, say around that 60. I know the other money was there. I'll come to that in a minute, but just as an exercise in how this works. So the 16 million was made available as part of a bigger amount. Is that a 16 million? Does it have to be repaid, or is it gone?
No, it really very simply falls as a subsidy. It was just like we talked about these 250 million subsidy. So it just was an extra piece of subsidy in that year.
Irish Rail then got a subsidy of 16 million, and they realised 20 million from the sale of that property. So the issue arose out of that required them to sell the property because they couldn't meet day-to-day expenses. And in spite of realising 20 million on the property sale, they still got 16 million of taxpayers' money as a subsidy.
They did.
that
In fact, yes, and to be precise, so they got 31 million last year.
That now.
Bit more, they got, yes. And in making, so let's say the government made that money available to us. So then we had to look when we were putting that money in, would we be overcompensating them for the services they provided, for example? And the net effect at the end of 2012 was that Irish Rail's operational deficit for 2012 was still 22 million, their deficit. And Dublin Bus's deficit was approximately 7 million for 2012. We made a payment of 31 million to Irish Rail from the additional subsidy was provided. We made a payment of about 5 million to Dublin Bus, but the net effect, they were still in deficit. Bus Éireann were only $500,000 projected deficit for the end of 2012, and there was a very good period in December, so we didn't make any payment into Bus Éireann.
Deputy Ross then was referring to the accounts, which I'm going to refer to. July 2012, the government approved a bailout of 36 million for CIE. Tell us a little bit about that. Was that paid? Has it been drawn down?
Exactly, that was paid through us as a subsidy to 31 and 5.
Fully drawn down.
And fully drawn down and paid in November and December 2012.
And they will account for that 36 million specifically to you.
That's correct.
So therefore, it comes under the remit of the CNAG because we look at your accounts.
Yes, did they discharge their contractual obligations, and were they overcompensate or not for the discharge of those obligations?
The accounts then were published in late 2012, and they contained probably the most significant piece of information was that PwC warned about the ability to continue as a going concern given its level of liabilities and concerns over its future and its future trading prospects, and that then the company said it would not come into profitability until at least 2015. So the backdrop to all of these companies is continued subsidy, massive amounts of money being paid in, taxpayers' money being paid into them, your organisation then giving that money in different ways to these organisations, and you setting the fares. I'm right so far?
You're right, so there's a bit of massive amounts of money. I wouldn't agree that there's a significant amount of money going in continued subsidy, but public transport is under-subsidised in Ireland. So I mean,
it's a massive amount of money,
yes,
to a company whose accounts show that they have trading difficulties and that they will not come into profitability until 2015.
Yes.
That is a huge problem for your organisation, for the state, and for the company. Now, for the travelling public then, all of that money going in through your organisation, and then you set the fares.
Yes.
But you said to us this morning that you only set the fares based on their contractual obligation to the service. So once they provide the service, you'll keep, and I know it comes from the government and so on, but it's your job to keep putting the money into them. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Well then, to go back to the accounts, you said earlier on also that, because my concern is, you said that you look at cost controls in the company, and they get 265 million euro a year. But if you're looking at cost controls, and you're also approving capital expenditure, do you look in detail at what that money is being spent on, whether it's value for money, and whether it continues to be value for money? Is that part of your remit?
It is.
So if CIE were to buy passenger carriages, which they did, for a number of million of US dollars, and they put them into service, but they didn't get value for money out of them because they didn't use them as they should have used them. Is that something that concerns you? Is that something that you would investigate? Has that come to light within your organisation?
Yes, we're aware of, yeah, yes, we're aware of that, and yes.
What can you tell about it? Is it $9 million?
No, it's significantly more than that. Essentially, of the rail fleet that they bought since 2004, 234 rail cars, there are about 21 of those unused because of the drop in passenger demand. And that they amount to a value of 44 million and that they keep in storage. Now, these are, sorry.
I just want to be clear about this. What was the cost of the overall contract?
There were 3 different contracts with Mitsui.
The American company?
No, they're a Japanese company for 234 rail cars. And if one broadly says that they were 2.2 million each, just roughly, so that would have been that'd be a 500 million contract in 3 tranches. The last tranche was a contract was awarded in December 2008, and there were 51 cars delivered from that contract. The net effect of all the rail car purchases, that there's 21 of them unused because passenger demand has gone down and the extra services haven't been provided. Those are in storage. Those contracts...
You're saying that the 21 carriages that were purchased that are not in use are worth 44 million?
That's correct.
So they spent 44 million on carriages that they currently have in storage. Does the storage cost anything? I presume they have some sort of...
Well, they're stored in their normal kind of rail storage. What they do is they recycle them in and out of the storage, and they put them into use, and then, keep them maintained.
One time there's 21 of them not used?
Any one time there's 21 of them, yes, not used, surplus.
What do you think of that?
Well, I think that the projections obviously were wrong on the basis on which the contracts were entered into. All those contracts were entered into before our time. We ended up paying some residual payments out in each of the years since we've been established as the delivery and the final payments for those rail cars.
What are we talking about for the orders again? 19?
Well, the last one was December 2008. There were orders made in 4 and 5 and 7 previous to that. So there had been a growing trend, and there had been work done by Irish Rail at the time in submitting their application to the Department of Transport on what they projected passenger numbers would be over a kind of a 13-year horizon. And the economic consultants came in and did a review of the business case, and there was a trend growth anticipated. Many of the lines would have been double or tripling over a 13-year period of passenger demand. But what happened actually was that there was a 17% drop in passenger volumes from 2008. Not only did they not increase at a kind of pro rata base, but they started to hemorrhage passenger numbers.
Who did that analysis?
Well, Irish Rail did the original work, and Good Bodies did a review of the business case.
How can you believe Irish Rail in particular, or indeed the CAE group of companies, when their accounts are in such a mess? I mean, that's the point essentially being made this morning. And I want to relate all of that massive loss of taxpayers' money. It is huge money. That a company could do that. A company in the private sector would be broke if they did that. And here they are showing gross inefficiency, poor quality in terms of information, where they would base their projections and purchases on. And then you as an organisation, and this is no disrespect to you, I'm just trying to get my head around the idea that all of that can be ignored almost, and you increase the fares. Instead of saying to the company, I'm sorry, there will be no future increases in terms of fares until such time as you get your house in order. You're squandering taxpayers' money, you're grossly inefficient, you're providing a poor service, and I won't increase your fares. Now, sorry.
The resale value of the...
Well, the question is, can you not take that position on behalf of the travelling public because you are a regulator in a sense.
Well,
That really was the essence of the earlier exchanges with you. And I just can't fathom why you cannot either turn around and do this to the company by way of putting a stop to the carry-on that's going on in CIE, or that you make some extraordinary submission to government, calling a halt to all of this unnecessary spend. Can you answer that for me?
Yeah, I'll attempt to answer it. It's a difficult area. We don't. The complexity is of you have state operators in place, and the public transport services are reliant on these big operators providing services. And
Can I just stop you there for a second? They actually are not, because in the private sector, a lot of these services can actually be provided. A lot of them can be provided, but CIE bully people off the pitch. And that has to be acknowledged here. And I've seen numerous reports from private bus operators in particular that will, contend that that is the case. We see it here in terms, for example, and I won't go into it now because it's not your remit, it's impossible to get to the end of the school transport system, and it's costing the taxpayer an enormous amount of money in terms of how it's managed. But to go back to my question, because I don't want to lose the track.
What I was trying to say is, like, public transport services at any point in time have to be provided. Okay, we are contracted with the operators. The operators are reducing their costs year on year, and when we look at their fares increases, it's in the context of, do we want to maintain services? What is the drop in subsidy? What is the drop in patronage revenues? And what is your cost control? So, for example, Ian Road Airn have dropped, I think, staff from 6,000 staff to 4,000 staff, 4,200, or 4,000 at the moment. So 2,000 staff over the last 8 years. Bus Airn have driven down the costs, and Dublin Bus have driven down the costs. Now, so we are seeing a cost reduction plans in the organisations. We are seeing growing efficiencies. We've seen in the Dublin area, where Dublin Bus is the biggest carrier of public transport in the state, we've seen a massive reorganisation, a fundamental reorganisation of their services and their network direct, much more efficient. We've reorganised the services for Bus Airn in the regional cities. We're seeing in Galway a 20% increase in revenue, from that. And we're now reviewing all services in rural areas throughout the state. So there is cost-cutting measures, there are efficiency measures in place. When we do get the fares increases and we look at the diminishing subsidies, we also have to take account as, do we want to keep the network of public transport services operational in the state? We've separately reported to the Minister on the bus market, and it's no secret that we have recommended to the Minister there should be an opening of the bus market in 2014. It's a matter for the government to consider that item, and they have to come back to us. We've met with the government's economic committee, and it's a matter that we've been told to wait till we get a response. We have identified that there could be savings made by some graded opening of the market. We think that could work well. It could also work well for the existing state operators as well, because they'll see a benchmarking of a private operator doing a similar business. So we're conscious of all these matters, but I come back to the fundamental point. They are not grossly inefficient, the organisations. Deloitte were commissioned by the Department of Transport in 2007, and they did a review of the operations of Dublin Bus and Bus Airn, and they said, in general, comparable with international standards. That's not to say that we can't achieve cost savings. So they're not grossly inefficient, and there is opportunities for efficiencies, but they are under-subsidised. And they also have the perfect storm as the subsidy is dropping, passenger numbers have been dropping across all operators. And because they're reliant on the revenue as well, on the passenger numbers, they've been hit by the double whammy of that, and the triple whammy of fuel duty rebate being gone. So all those factors have come to create the cash flow problems for the CIE group, and have come and create the need for 36 million to go in, and create a need for our fares increases. But we have reserved our position quite strongly, we say we will only consider a fares increase annually on the basis of projections of cost savings and revenues and the services you're going to provide and the quality of what you've delivered in the last year.
Okay, well, I disagree with you on some of the points you've made, and certainly going to come back to them in some other way. But one final question in relation to the cost of the board, the cost of the chairman, on that. Do you have a comment on that in terms of is that something that you would consider in terms of their costs?
I wouldn't have a comment on that. These are
in terms of the sale, in terms of the resale value of these carriages.
Yes. Well, faced with the situation that they have these surplus carriages, we've actually commissioned a report from Jacobs Engineering, who have expertise in the rail area. We said, well, what should one do with these rail carriages? And their view was that it would be inappropriate to sell them on. There will be passenger demand growth in the coming years. What they're saying is, let's look at the most cost-effective storage of those rail cars. So they've reviewed the whole rail fleet, and they said one shouldn't dispose of it now, because then we'll be faced into further capital investment in the future, and this rail fleet has 20 and 30 years rail life, and with a cost-efficient storage it would be best in the public interest to hold on to them and there will be a growth in passenger numbers. Whatever, but there should be, yes.
Over a matter of years.
Well, the projection, I couldn't make a projection on that because it's so volatile in the numbers. But if there was a growth in passenger numbers, there would be more revenue, which will allow us to put in more services. We'll be able to increase the frequency of services on lines which don't have inadequate services at the moment, or suboptimal services.
And finally, is that not something, the 44 million and the 21 carriages, is that not something that you would have thought, in the context of your opening statement, that you would have told the Public Accounts Committee? Judge what kind of information comes from an organisation like yours, that you would actually report this to us and say?
Well, in the context of my opening statement, I've tried to give everything as brief as possible and trying to keep it in summary. I mean, the question is whether it should have been in the annual report. Maybe your point is taken there. I mean,
It's not an insignificant
no, I mean, it wouldn't be our general policy as an organisation. If you look at the amount of information that we provide and the transparency of our operation, that we try to keep stuff hidden. And I take your point, there was something important like that.
He's letting me in just.
All right, okay.
I just want to take up the point that, and welcome Mr. Murphy and his colleagues. So to take up the point that, to follow on, the question really was, what's the resale value of those 21 carriages that are unused at the moment?
I couldn't tell you what the resale value of them is.
Why not?
Because I haven't looked into resale value, because the recommendation from the consultants that we brought in was not to sell on, so I didn't pursue then what might be the market value of those.
See, the context is 16 million of taxpayers' money was put into Irish Rail at the end of last year. I'm assuming the investment in those carriages was the order of 44 million. That's over double that figure, right? And we're not living, I mean, the certainty is that you put 16 million of taxpayers' money in. There's an uncertainty regarding the future growth in terms of Irish Rail. You're telling me that they have a 20 or 30 life cycle, right? They're sitting there doing nothing. So I would have thought, as a normal business procedure, I would have asked, Irish Rail is starved of cash at the moment. I would have asked, that's a bit like someone having a fleet of racehorses, and we'll say they have a couple of yearlings, 20 of them, and they're told, actually, we'll hold on to them, they might win a few races in 3 or 4 years' time. And while the business can't sustain that, I'm not certain CIE can sustain having 21 carriages at the tune of 44 million sitting idly by in a carriage graveyard.
It's just supplemental. Can you tell us what the cost of storing these would be?
I don't have a cost for storing them. I don't think
For the resale value, and you don't have a cost for
there's no particular storage built or are devised for them. They're caught within the normal storage.
How do you make a decision then if you actually don't have that information?
Well, the primary decision is whether I know that the storage, there wasn't any bespoke storage particularly created for these supplemental rail cars, so they're captured within the normal storage cycle.
Let me just go back to the main point, right?
Yeah.
I would have thought a phone call would be able to tell you what the resale value of these carriages is. And if the resale carriage, let's assume at the very worst, that worth half the value, which would be 21 million, right? That means you could sell those in the morning. No subvention would have gone into Irish Rail last year. And furthermore, right, can we now take it that you will find out what the resale value of those carriages are, and that you will advise this committee of that figure, and furthermore, that you'll find out the cost of storage, right? And can I make a point, as a person who uses Irish Rail, what are the measurements you use in terms of defining the subsidy? CIE do a very good job, the staff do a very good job, and the trains are on time. I've no qualms in that. Broadband is a joke. Mobile coverage is a joke. The quality of food on the trains is basically at this stage third world. It's now down to a cup of coffee and a sandwich. You can get nothing else. Eating habits have moved on. So if Irish Rail are trying to encourage business people to use Irish Rail, so if they get on a train that their mobile coverage breaks down throughout the train journey, that their broadband in a lot of cases is not working, and in a lot of cases is so slow, and furthermore that people can't get to, and I would have thought are they included in your measurements? And I want to say the Irish Rail staff themselves, in terms of what the service they provide to customers and dealing in the trains, is an excellent service. But the infrastructure and furthermore, you talk about the carriages. I've taken trains whereby that they haven't enough carriages on, and you have people standing on a train, and that's clearly there are cutbacks in the number of carriages they're putting on, and that would strike me as poor planning, right? So the question I'm asking you really is, do you take those measurements into account when you're, because for me, travelling by rail is the most efficient, and anyone is probably the nicest form of travel. And yet, the problem is that when people want to use it, the infrastructure does not appear to be there. So you're talking about 21 carriages sitting idle. I've seen on numerous occasions recently, and I've contacted Irish Rail myself on it, because I feel it's something that I feel strongly about, providing a rail service, an infrastructure rail service. And I'm a believer in public transport. But the problem is that you have the contradiction of 21 carriages sitting doing nothing. In a lot of cases, in recent times, they haven't enough carriages on. And then at the same time, we find that you can't tell us the value of carriages, and you put 16 million of taxpayers' money in to Irish Rail, I think specifically, at the end of last year. And what I'm saying is that in life, if we take care of the small things, invariably the big things work out. And I think what's happening here is so can you just go back? Can we get a guarantee from you that as a matter of urgency we'll come back with the resale value of those 21 carriages and the storage costs? Can we take that as a given?
You can, yes.
Okay. Can you explain to me then the measurements you use in terms of providing subvention, and do you look at the aspects of not only time, because the train times are beyond reproach, they're excellent. The service delivered by staff is excellent in the various stations. But explain to me about the measurements.
Well, we monitor the quality of their service as well. So we get reporting by a third party, which is an independent party, on cleanliness, presentation of information in stations, timetable information, website information. We track all the complaints, the numbers of complaints, the categories that they fall under. We benchmark it.
How many of your staff members travel by train?
Well, we have a policy as an authority to use public transport for all our meeting engagements unless it's impossible to do so. So they
No doubt
travel
that
regularly.
I've no doubt that if some of your staff used Irish Rail within 3 or 4 runs of intercity or whatever, they would see, and any business people I talk to, these are basic features. Have you asked why broadband is so poor? Have you asked why mobile coverage is so poor? Have you asked why the quality of offer in terms of menu of food is so limited in this modern day and age?
Well, taking on the Wi-Fi side, we're actually currently at the moment looking at the whole Wi-Fi offering across the Irish Rail. I think that's something we're correct.
And one of the issues that Irish Rail have is
Do you agree with me what I'm saying about this, the lack of
issues with the Wi-Fi, there's no doubt about that, but the issue that they have, because they're a rail service, they're relying on the service that's provided by the telecoms operators along that line. And they have difficulties in certain parts of the country in getting a service, but it's because of the service that's offered by the different operators, the different telephone operators. In terms of the broadband then has been very successful. It's been very successfully used on Irish Rail, and the demand is very high. And then that has an impact.
I'm sorry.
Impact
No,
on
I'm
the
sorry.
quality
I'm
as
sorry.
well
I'm
of
a
the service.
user, right? At times the broadband is not working, the Wi-Fi is not working, and when it's working, it's exceptionally slow, right? If you're looking to attract the business person to come on who's paying, you have to provide the service. So you have to take it from me that what I'm telling you is fact. Do you believe there's no issue with the Wi-Fi?
I haven't said that, and I've said there are issues because of the quality of the service that's received from the operators. There's actually issues associated with certain parts of the country not having coverage, and if you do pass through those parts, if the rail line goes through there, there is an issue about the broadband falling out. That is a difficulty for Irish Rail to take up with the telephone operators. There's also an issue then when broadband is used on the railway line, in terms of its slowness because of the demand, you know, for users. It's very popular on rail lines, and as such, it does impact on the service. But they're very much aware of it. We're very much aware of it, and we want to make whatever we can do to improve the service.
The problem is that your Irish Rail are competing in effectively a national transport market, right? If they're not providing the service, and someone can use a bus and get far better Wi-Fi coverage, it's very, very difficult. So I would have thought it's an imperative that they ensure, and I would ask you to take it up with Irish Rail, that in terms of Wi-Fi, mobile coverage, and the final point is in terms of the offering that they provide, I think it would encourage significantly more people to travel by Irish Rail, because when you're travelling on a train, it's far easier to get work done, and these are practical measures we don't talk about. So do you take those measurements into account when you're allocating funding?
Well, in terms of funding allocation, it's basically looking at the high-level kind of costs associated with running the service, what revenues they get in terms of their passenger revenue, and then the subvention is the difference between those. In terms of our general management meetings that we have and the ongoing performance meetings that we have with Irish Rail, we do look at across all the customer service issues, including what service they're providing for business customers. They're very aware that they have lost business customers on rail lines.
Which is a pity.
It is, and they do recognise that they need to improve the service for their business customers. And that's a segment of the Irish Rail customers that they want to improve the offer. And we're working with them to try and do that.
Thank you.
Deputy Deasy.
Sorry.
Sorry, Deputy Dowers.
I'm just going to say, Deputy, that their focus on the customer has strengthened in the last 12 months, but they've appointed a commercial director, which is to look at this whole issue of marketing and the customer offering and remove it away just from operations and capital and actually give it a focus. And that engagement that we have with that commercial director has proved very, very positive. He's grown the student market substantially, and now he's looking at these other niche markets to see, can we get the offering right?
Same requirements in terms of broadband?
Yes. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Murphy and your colleagues. Could I ask a general question first, which is on the extent to which the National Transport Authority is directive in terms of rolling out developments in transport? I mean, both in the area of delivery of day-to-day services and also in terms of capital investment projects.
So the question is how directive we are, or
Yeah, I mean, do you have a policy role in terms of the delivery of, say, day-to-day bus services, say, in Dublin, for example?
we do, but we do. So let's take it at the broad level. We have all the services that are supposed to be providing defined in the contract. Okay, every change of service has to come through us, and we can mandate changes in service. But taking that broad role, across the CIE group, there are 10,000 employees. We have 80 people in our organisation. So we have to keep our directive engagement at this level of the contract, key strategies, key areas of where we want to improve. We can't get down to the day-to-day operation of services. But we process hundreds and hundreds of change service applications, and we mandate changes to services where we see a need.
So, for example, if it was discovered that there was a need for a bus service between two suburbs in Dublin that don't currently have a linkage, that you could direct a Dublin bus to put on a service there?
We could direct Dublin bus to put on a service there, or we could advertise and a tender for a service there. The question, though, is there money to put on? I think we're aware, and Dublin Bus is aware, is that there's many areas in Dublin City, while the Network Direct was very successful in corridor, better corridor management, better frequency, better use of quality bus lanes, and also integration better of services. The consequence of the drop in subsidy is that what we would like to do in local services or links between the orbital towns in Dublin, we haven't been able to do, and it's been parked a little bit. We would like to do more in that area and reconfigure those.
But I mean, would you have any knowledge, or how would you get the knowledge as to whether there's a need for a good link between one case and another? I mean, I happen to represent Clondalkin and Lucan, and in fact, I mean, there are very poor linkages between those two suburbs, even though they're quite close together. I mean, at times it will mean that people will have to go towards town and take a bus out, if they want to make that journey. So I'm just wondering to what extent you're sort of, on the lookout for those kind of needs, and how you would make such a decision.
Well, at this year in 2013, our target is to look at the reconfiguration of some of these local and urban services, look at the areas of demand. We have very significant, we're kind of the unique tools in our organisation. We have a kind of a national we have a transport model for the region, is incredibly detailed. We can look at kind of projected passenger demand. We can look at the census returns, and we're actually have done a national household travel survey to pick up travel demands other than going to work and to education. So we have a project this year now to look at local services in urban services in Dublin and see what reconfiguration is needed, what is being unmet. The constraint is, can we do it within the available subsidy and passenger revenues? Can we manage it? And that'll be the challenge. Rather than defining the service, the challenge is providing the service.
Well, can I look at the other end of that, which is probably easier to look at, because, and I'm talking about, say, existing public services where there's very little usage of them. I mean, for example, I give you both examples are from rail. I mean, my impression is that the local rail station in Clondalkin, for example, is barely used. And if you have figures, I'd be interested to know what they are. So you sort of wonder as to the value of that investment. I mean, another example that has been brought to my attention is the extreme lack of usage of the Limerick to Athenry train, and if you have figures on that one, I'd be interested. But I mean, anecdotally, I'm told it's something like 5 or 6 people using it, per train, and that it's actually quite difficult to you know, to use the stations if you're wanting to leave a car there. I mean, I had a case recently explained to me that somebody tried to leave their car at our Drahan station. They insisted on getting on having to pay for the car to be parked there, and then the machine wasn't working. So in fact, at the end, the person just drove on because they felt it wasn't worth it. So I mean, and if you find that something is just not, you know, being used, I mean, do you have a role in terms of suggesting to Irish Rail, or if it could be a bus company, that perhaps, you know, the service required there either should be dropped or should be delivered by a cheaper method?
We do have the power to tell them the service should be dropped. Okay, so there's a matter of having the powers of what one wishes to do with public transport. The fact is that much of the public transport is actually loss-making. You know, and even
understand that. I accept that it has to be.
That's right. So, and then there's the issue of, you know, people's accessibility to public transport, serving rural areas. So we know that some services have very poor patronage on them, okay? And we realise that. We also know that if we withdraw the public transport service in that area, that 50% of people in rural Ireland don't have a car, for example. So those people are disadvantaged. We also know 50% of people in Dublin, of adults over 18, don't own a car. So it's the balance between, it is a socially necessary service. It's been provided, in some cases, a very high subsidy.
I absolutely accept that, but sometimes perhaps a minibus might do the job of a train.
Well, I think okay, forgetting the minibus and the train, there is a question of the use of large buses and small buses. Let's take that point, and I think, you know, because we've taken over the rural transport function, which operates in a small bus model in a local area, we want to look at how much that maybe could be extended a little bit, you know, for serving isolated areas and connecting then to the bigger bus services that we're providing through the Bus Éireann contract. And there is no doubt that there are many rail services that could be provided alternatively by bus. But the fact is that there's an asset there's a rail asset there, there's an infrastructure there, and there is a kind of a journey associated with rail that is different to bus. And you know, the issue of cutting the services and closing lines, we did that in Rosslare Waterford, you know, because it was just unsustainable. We were able to put replacement bus services. But, you know, we'd be very, very cautious about this issue of lightly used rail lines. Yes, they are lightly used. Yes, they're heavily subsidised. But there's also a need for people to travel there as well. And as if we can get the companies to trim costs generally, grow their markets, in that way, then the more heavily used lines can greater subsidise the lightly used lines.
I mean, I entirely accept that we should accept that public transport will generally operate at a loss, but where it's operating at a gross loss. I mean, if we take I mean, you may not have the figures on this, but I'd be curious to know, if, say, in the Limerick to Athenry line, what it costs to run on a yearly basis, and how much money you actually take in from customers. And then my guess would be that it would be probably under 5% of the running costs would actually come from customers. I mean, would I be correct in
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yes, you're correct. It's a significant subsidy going into that.
So you're saying it's actually a 95%, something approaching a 95% subsidy on that particular route.
Yeah. So at this year, we're just finalising our own review of that corridor to see what can be done to better utilise it. Can we do better bus connection links to it? Is there something about the timetabling? But in essence, you're talking about a recent capital asset that was built that is being underutilised. Passenger demand has generally gone down the network. The numbers haven't materialised as expected. And yes, there are a range of rail services that are very heavy subsidy going into them. What we're also going to do this year is look generally across the rail network as what is the strategy for providing services, you know, where should we concentrate the subsidy money. But I still come back to the point that when we be loath to, you know, cut public transport services, generally in the state, whether they're bus or rail, because our services are underprovided across the state. We need to grow more public transport services, and I think people in rural Ireland actually would feel that they're not well served enough at all by public transport.
No, I don't want to be misunderstood in the sense that, I would, for example, I know Deputy O'Donnell, made the point that he supports public transport, as do I. I think it's very important we have a good public transport service, and I've no doubt that, for example, the Cork to Dublin rail line is run at a loss as well, and I would in no sense advocate that it be terminated because it is serving a significant number of people. But it's just for the scales are so great in terms of subsidy, it would seem it might be better perhaps to put the subsidy into an area where perhaps more use would be made of the service. And I suppose it's inevitable, given that I'm a Dublin deputy, that I'll focus on this, but I would be aware that there will be, significant demand for inter-suburb services in terms of buses in Dublin, that which would make some people's lives a lot easier. Now, they would probably still run at a loss, but I doubt they'll run at a 95% loss. So to the extent that you have a policy, a position there, I would appreciate if you could direct it where you are assisting a greater number of people in that regard.
Yes, okay, point. I understand you.
Is there any way that can be sort of, if you say come back to see us in a year's time, would you be able to show any developments in that?
In a year's time, I'd expect, Deputy, we'd have completed our Western Rail Corridor review. We'd have completed our public transport reviews of all the other regions in the state, the rural areas, south, outside the region cities pocket, and we'd have completed a review of local services in Dublin. And then we'd have the scale of what we'd like to provide and the scale of what we can provide, and are there changes that we can make. So I definitely feel there'd be a block of work done that would help me to better answer your question in a year's time. But what we have done, we've only been 3 years in existence. We've actually worked closely with Dublin Bus on the reconfiguration of Dublin Bus services, and we've reconfigured the city services in the 4 cities substantially. And we've actually now taken over the rural transport function, and we're looking at how we can utilise that better across the state to fill the gaps. So there's been a lot of work done, but there is other work to be done. I acknowledge that.
Just in relation of capital investment projects, obviously as you're only in existence for 3 years, you won't have been involved at the earlier stages of, say, some of the light rail infrastructure that was planned, that's planned for Dublin, and most of which has been shelved because of our current economic situation. But it strikes me that a lot of money will have been wasted in those areas. Now maybe some of it isn't wasted in the sense that maybe if these projects come into play in the future, but can you for example, to what extent would you have a role in deciding on, say, which project in terms of, say, a Lewis-type system will be prioritised in the greater Dublin area? Because it strikes me that certain ones are much more important than others. Such, for example, as the interconnector from Houston Station towards the Dart line.
Well, I suppose the primary decision-making in all this, in the end, is government, But I suppose if there was one authority that is the primary advisor and recommender on that, it would be ours. So we're supposed to strategise and analyse and assess the relative merits of the infrastructure and recommend the ones that we think should progress. So in that regard, if monies, there is a 5-year capital programme out to 2016, we know the parameters of that. That'll only deliver Lewis BXD. The key issue post that capital programme, there's work ongoing at the moment, is where should the next tranche of investment be in the region and in the state, and we will be advising the department on that. So, and the way we do that is we do an analysis of the needs, assessment of the costs, and then the cost benefit.
So how much would have been spent so far on the interconnector projects between Houston and the dart. I mean, I know there's nothing on the ground yet, but
Well, in the cases of the interconnector and Metro North, there was a substantial amount of money spent. Both projects, well, in the case of Metro North, they'd achieved its statutory rail order, with the complex process. But in the case of Metro North, there was 162 million spent before the project was deferred.